Our third session here. My name is Charles Devermeren. I am the CEO and co-founder of Link Senior, and I'm super excited about this third session. So first of all, let me welcome everybody to our Activity Strong 2022 Summit. This is our third annual summit. Activity Strong is this platform that we started at Link Senior, that we're leading at Link Senior, but it would never be what it is without the amazing collaboration and contribution from Activity Connection, NAP, and NCAP. So as I mentioned, today's session is our third one. Let me go through a few announcements before we get into our panel. So up to 6 NAB, NCAP, NCTRC, and or NCCDP CEU credits are available. To earn these credits, you need to attend a full session. So as few as 1 session or as many as 6 sessions. You need to fill out the CEU survey no later than midnight Friday, June 25th, so we can process your certificate of attendance. And again, we can issue up to 6 hours of credit. Please note that due to the very high number of attendees, these certificates will be sent out via email throughout next week, so the week of June 27th, and no later than Friday, June 1st, at the end of the day. And as always, should you have any questions, please send them to webinars with an S, webinars@linksenior.com. As a reminder, this session is being recorded, and as we are all familiar with Zoom, just as a reminder, we can use both the chat and the Q&A feature as they are enabled. If you have specific questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A. And if you choose to chat and want to chat with everyone, please make sure to select everyone as the default in the chat. Otherwise, it's only going to go to the panelists. And so one last note is the secret bingo word for this session is A, the letter A, and the word A. So let me introduce our third session today. So it is about dementia care, the social prescription in action. I could probably sit the whole day here talking about how excited I am to have Dr. Cameron Camp, David Troxell, and Dr. Jen Stelter join us. But I think at the very least, the easiest way to get us started is for me to welcome them on stage. If you don't mind turning on your camera, Dr. Camp, David, and Jen. And thank you so much for joining us. You are, the three of you, international, well-known experts in the field of dementia care. And what better way to start thinking about the social prescription than the world of dementia care? So with that, Jen, I'd love to get you started, and I will stop sharing my screen so you can take it away. Thank you so much, the three of you.
Thank you so much, Charles. I appreciate you having us here today. And of course, here I'm representing Link Senior as our Director of Product Research and also the Chief Engagement Officer of the Resident Engagement Institute. So thank you. And I am just enamored with our panel here with Cameron and David. So Cameron, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll move on to David.
Sure. So I'm Cameron Camp, Director of Research and Development for the Center for Applied Research in Dementia. We focus on the use of Montessori methods as a way of engaging persons with dementia, but also as a way of engaging staff. So we see it as a system-wide approach to create truly person-centered care.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us here today. David?
Well, hello, Jennifer. Hello, Cameron. It's such an honor to present with you. I'm David Troxell. I'm in Sacramento, California, and I've worked in the field of dementia care, hard to believe, about 30 years. Started my career at the University of Kentucky Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. I've worked in university settings, adult day settings with the Alzheimer's Association. Again, a shout out to the longest day for my Alzheimer's Association friends. And the last 10 or 12 years, I've worked as a consultant and writer and trainer and work with organizations to help them develop excellent memory care programs. I've written 2 books on activities and The activities team are really my favorite people to talk with, and delighted to be here today, Jennifer. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And just a little bit of an addition in terms of my work in the field, as Charles had mentioned, my company is called NeuroEssence, and we actually just opened up the Dementia Connection Institute here in January. So we're really excited about our pursuits here in the field to bring education and training and just really a passion for the idea around expressing non-pharmacological intervention in our work, and really trying to highlight that. And of course, we're talking about social prescription today, which is really what we do at the Institute, in terms of really trying to know the person individually and what would work for them from a non-pharmacy standpoint, and to build our caregivers toolboxes to the best of their ability to really help and support the person that they're caring for. So I'm also an author with Johns Hopkins, and my book just came out last year called The Busy Caregiver's Guide to Advance Alzheimer's Disease. And so in there, I talk about a new model called the Dementia Connection Model. So I hope you can check it out. But without further ado, let's hop into our very important topic today and talk about how do we use this idea of the social prescription model within dementia care. And so what we'd like to do is to be able to define, or let me go through the objectives here. One is to define the concept of social prescription in dementia care. Then I'd like to have us look at how do we apply the model of social prescription across methodologies of care, and then use data to create culture change within the concept of social prescription. So let's dive in. So when we talk about social prescription, right, what really makes up our health is a number of things. But when we talk about our health in terms of various ways to look at it, our social surroundings actually impact 70% of our health. That's where we live, our education, who we interact with, who's in our social network, right? Our meaning and purpose in life, our strengths, our weaknesses, really who we are makes up 70% of our health, right? And so when we talk about health as a general concept, it's much more than just our physical health. I remember thinking back in about, I think it was 2012, CMS had redone the guidelines within our senior living environment, and they added the psychosocial well-being component, right? Number one, it's a little appalling that it took till 2012 to do that, but I'm glad that they finally did, right? They're saying that the person's health does not just constitute their physical and their medical health, but it also constitutes their psychosocial well-being, basically who they are. And so we know that it's a really important aspect of care. And I know that Cameron talks about this, and so does Charles, about meaning is medicine, right? And so when we talk about that, that just basically means that the more that we can fulfill the psychosocial component of the person's health through the use of meaning, that's really going to help to provide that care that we want, right? Whether we swap out care with medicine or medicine with care, that's what we want. And we can provide that meaning through engagement, right? And so it's really about encouraging our caregivers, our treatment teams, right? Even our C-suite individuals, our organizers and operators, to support all domains of wellness, not just our physical needs for our residents. So specifically in dementia care, unfortunately, there's still no set medical treatment for dementia. So when we talk about medical model versus different other types of models, the medical model doesn't necessarily work here as it would maybe black and white. But what does work here is social prescription. And that means we've got to understand the disease and its progression, how it's impacting the individual and their caregivers. And really it's about us knowing who the person is and incorporating that into their care, engagement, interactions. So it's allowing us to look at the person's essence, who they are, and let that be the driver of their care. And as staff or caregivers, we need to be able to enable social prescription by engaging with the person, not to them, right? And that's a really important difference when we talk about that, right? It's about being with them and encouraging them and being alongside them, doing it with them, and not just telling them what to do, which is very similar to the medical model, right? I think we all know that saying of take 2 pills, call me in the morning, right? We're away from that now, and that can't be what drives dementia care. So we've seen social prescriptions starting to work, and some of the great presenters here today have already shared some of their work and what they've seen. So I want to share a little bit of what Link Senior has done and what we've seen on our end in terms of some research. So in 2017, Link Senior partnered with the Responsive Group in Toronto, Western Oregon University, and Baycrest. And what they did was a year-long study with 185 residents. And these were folks in long-term care and in memory care communities. And they split them up into 2 groups, low engagement residents and high engagement residents. So as you can imagine, the high engagement residents that we were focusing on, or they were focusing on highly engaging those residents in the types of activities that they were being provided. And you can see the results here, right? That the study found that being highly engaged in recreational activity was associated with really positive outcomes. They saw a 20% decrease in antipsychotic, and I keep saying because I wasn't around when that study happened, but I'm part of the Link Senior team now, so that's kind of why I go back and forth with that, because I love our family here at Link Senior. So they saw a 20% decrease in antipsychotic use, 18% decrease in aggressive behaviors, 3% increase in cognitive performance. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot, but that actually is a lot, because it is difficult to increase cognition when someone is losing it. There are ways to do it, but it is a challenge. So we'd like to see at least maintenance. So the fact that they saw an increase in 3% is actually really good. And then 20% increase in social engagement. So these are great numbers to start to see that when we focus on really engaging the person who they are, through social prescription, that we can see some great clinical outcomes. Now, I just want to add here, when I add on the slide, is that through our Link Senior product and what we bring to our customers, stay tuned, because we are looking to really incorporate this sense of the engagement prescriptions that's part of the social prescription model into our product. So stay tuned. We're excited to bring that to you soon. So now what we're going to do is we looked at some research, but now we're going to look at some empirically validated methodologies that are just exemplars of the social prescription model. And so Cameron, take it away.
All right. So as I said before, we're very invested in the use of Montessori principles as a way of engaging people with dementia and as a way of engaging people in general. And, I can talk about these things, but I thought I'd start off by showing a video which illustrates a number of our most important points. And so, Jen, occasionally I will ask you to pause. So let me give you some background. We do our work around the world. We have training partners on a number of continents. This is a place in Montpellier in the south of France. And we're very much invested in what we call resident-driven communities, where the residents in memory care control their own lives, control their own community, decide for themselves how they're going to greet new members into the community, where they're going to go for outings, what they're going to eat, what they're going to do, how they'll celebrate life when someone passes away. And so in this place in the south of France in the summer, they decided that they did not want a heavy meal for dinner. They wanted something lighter, like vegetable soup. And so a subcommittee of the food committee was formed, the soup committee. And so we're going to watch the soup committee in action. And in this nursing home, they only admit persons who have moderate to advanced dementia. So we'll go ahead and start the video here. And in French, it says, preparing the vegetables for the soup of the evening. Pause. Now, this lady is interesting. If you're familiar with the MMSE, the mini mental status exam, it goes from 0 to 30, 23 or below, some evidence of dementia. This woman has an MMSE score of 0. If that was all that you knew about her, would you consider her to be a good candidate for the SOUP committee? But you see, the Montessori approach focuses on a rehabilitation perspective with regard to dementia as opposed to a medical model like Jennifer was talking about before. And so we look at what capabilities remain. And we, again, knowing who the person is, you want to match the capabilities to the person and to enable through that process to find activity that is personally meaningful and ideally that enables them to contribute to the welfare of their community. You know, it's often said it's just like riding a bike. And that's really true of procedural memory systems, things that we've practiced over the years. But that's only true if you're allowed to get on the bike. It only happens, these muscle memories, to use Montessori's term and the term that athletes and dancers use, these muscle memories only come back when you have the green beans in your hand. So go ahead and continue. Pause. So here's a question for you. Where's the dementia? You know, if I was in France, I'd be saying, où est la démence? Many times people think of dementia in terms of the deficits or the responsive behaviors, but this is what dementia can look like in, using a Montessori term, a prepared environment. An environment where the person's strengths are emphasized, where the environment enables a person to circumvent their deficits, where a person is engaged in meaningful activity. The second question I would ask you is, are these people suffering? You know, if you really buy into the medical model, you see all kinds of terms like patient and Alzheimer's sufferer, but that's on us. It is not a mandatory requisite of having that diagnosis. These people all have dementia. They are not suffering in this context. I mean, we're very good at enabling people to suffer, but we can also be very good in enabling people to live well in spite of a diagnosis of dementia or diabetes or cancer. It's about living and living well, as opposed to defining a person by a disease process. Go ahead. Of course, she's using a knife. She's less likely to cut herself than we are. She has a few more decades of experience. Pause. Another question for you. Where are the staff? And the answer is doing a great job. They have worked with these residents to enable the residents to do this for themselves. They worked with the residents in advance to enable them to learn the procedures, to get this set up. Maria Montessori said, everything that you do for me, you take away from me. Think about it. Have you ever seen a child where the parent does everything for the child? How does that work out? And it can be done out of love, but it still doesn't end well. So this changes the very nature of our obligation, our way of interacting with people with dementia. It's about enabling, in the best sense of the word, people to be as independent as possible. So we look at autonomy and independence. Autonomy is having choice, like what you want to have for dinner. Independence is being enabled to do it for yourself. Montessori also said we do our job best when they do not know we are present. So the idea of doing everything for persons with dementia can be done out of love, but there's a different way, and it produces very different results. So continue. And pause here. Now, this lady is very interesting here at the end of the table with the silver hair. She has advanced dementia. She has also had a stroke. So she is paralyzed on the entire right side of her body. If that was all you knew about her, would you consider her to be a candidate for the SOUP committee? But when you focus on what capabilities a person still has, as opposed to what deficits they have, if you think about how to enable a person to circumvent their deficits, it leads you in a different direction. So you see that white wooden platform there. Woman at this nursing home who was in charge of dishwashing saw this lady and knew about the soup committee. So she went home and made this wooden platform. And from underneath, she drove nails. And so with this platform, this resident, this woman, is able to pick up a carrot, pat it down, have the nails hold it still so that she can peel the carrot using only one hand. So let's see what it looks like. Okay. And she has to clean up her workstation, decide which peeler to use. Where's the dementia? Pause. So here's a final question for you. Did this woman have this tool, this platform in her kitchen when she was a young wife? No. In middle age? No. She only encountered this tool after she had advanced dementia and after she had a stroke. And yet she has learned a new way to peel carrots using this tool. The capacity to learn is there in persons with dementia if we know how to teach them, if we use the memory and learning systems that are still available. So if you ever hear an expert, quote unquote, tell you that a person with dementia cannot learn, please remember this lady, because that expert's full of beans and is either unaware of 4 decades worth of research to the contrary, or worse, they are. I'll let you think about that. Maria Montessori said, when the person and the environment fit, when the environment enables a person to use their abilities, circumvent their deficits, be engaged in meaningful activity, a process comes into the world. She called this process normalization. Normalization is the perfect word. Our duty, our mission is to create normalizing environments for persons with dementia. You know, when you're sick, you always say, I can't wait till I feel normal again. To be able to bring this to persons with dementia is a blessing for them and for us. So, you know, I can talk about it, but this is what it looks like. And Jennifer, I'll have you make sure you cue me when I've only got like 5 minutes, 2 minutes left, because I go for days. So, all right, we'll go ahead to the next slide then. So we've also been involved with research, and basically what we see in skilled nursing and assisted living is massive drops when you use these approaches in the use of antipsychotics, anti-anxiety drugs, depression, almost the elimination of sleeping aids and hypnotics. It's really strange. When people are awake and engaged throughout the day, they sleep at night. Go figure, right? But if they're disengaged, if they're apathetic during the day and sleeping, then at night they may be awake, so they're given a hypnotic to help them sleep, which stays in the system, so they sleep during the day. Yeah, there has to be a different way. When a person is engaged in meaningful activity, you're not going to see people being agitated. They will be like in the last presentation with writing, they will be in the moment. You cannot be engaged in meaningful activity and be exhibiting a responsive behavior at the same time. It is the best treatment for responsive behaviors because it's about engagement, it's about living. And when people have that option, people tend to want to choose that option. So anyway, what we always say is, especially to owners or administrators, you pick the outcomes. If we implement this approach, truly person-centered, and persons being residents and staff, whatever measures you choose, they're going to flow in good directions. So you choose. Yeah. Next slide. So it is possible to live well with dementia. People with dementia can still learn. It's all in how we teach them. Maya Angelou said, "I will forget what you say, I'll forget what you do, I'll never forget how you make me feel." And so a person with dementia can learn to like the people they live with, that work with them, the place where they live, or they can learn to hate it. But they're going to learn. They're going to learn something. It's really weird. People move into congregate living with dementia, and we expect them to learn where the room is and where to go for activities and lunch. There's not a lot of like conscious attempts to teach them. So, I mean, implicitly, we're expecting people with dementia to learn. Why not use and approach a learning system that works very well and enables people to reacquire capabilities as well as learn new ones? Imagine, if you will, a group of 6 people with dementia at a Chinese restaurant, all eating with chopsticks, all of whom learned how to do that after they moved into a memory care neighborhood. See, when we begin to realize that persons with dementia can still learn, it opens up some interesting doors. We ask different questions. First, what would we like persons with dementia to learn? And then second, what would they like to learn? So when we start to think of ourselves as teachers, once again, it shifts our view in terms of our duty and what's possible. And so, independence and purpose. Responsive behaviors, we use Yiska Cohen-Mansfield's terminology. We assume that these behaviors are representing unmet human needs. They are a form of communication. And so, we have entire courses on trying to ask the question, why is this happening? And the answer can never be because they have dementia. How do we know they have dementia? Because this is happening. Why is this happening? Because they have dementia. That doesn't help anybody. But, there are ways systematically to be a detective, to try to uncover why something's happening. And the best place to start is, what would cause me to act that way in the same circumstances? If I put my key in the wrong door in a hotel, it's because they all look alike, all these doors. But if a person with dementia goes into the wrong room in a place where all the doors look alike and all the room decorations and furniture look alike, we say, well, they've got dementia. Hello. All right, next slide. So the key values on which everything is based that we talk about involve respect, dignity, and equality. Little things like, instead of saying, can you help me, which is a test, to say, would you help me, which is a request between equals, which gives the power to the person with dementia. Things like when you talk to somebody, get at their eye level. Never literally talk down to a person in a wheelchair. We say these are little things that are big things. This is what influences how a person feels in their interactions with staff, families. So we focus on strengths and the minimal amount of assistance needed to be successful. Minimal amount of successful to be successful. I love it when staff come to me and say, let me tell you what our residents were able to do today without me. That's when I know we've turned a corner and they get this stuff. We focus on meaningful roles and community involvement. So a lot of times, we have committees that help guide things like outings and all. We often have social concerns committees in memory care, where residents want to do things for those who are, and I quote, less fortunate than we are. So, for example, I've seen persons with dementia taking toiletries bags to homeless shelters, doing fundraisers for women in a women's shelter, doing fundraisers for rescue villages. I've also seen memory care neighborhoods where they form their own companies. And one that formed a company to make all natural dishwasher soap. One that formed a company in Arizona to make CBD oil-based salve for muscles and joints. And they sell their products and use this money to donate to charities. And so it's about an environment that promotes engagement. It's about being connected within your own community and to the outside world. I was just in a place in Washington State where there is a stand right inside the main entrance, and it's got shelves and it's got snacks and water, and the sign says, you know, for all delivery persons, please help yourself. And it's maintained by the residents. Outside, there's sort of a bookshelf, and it has rocks on it. And these are rocks, if you've seen them, where, you know, you pick one up and you take it someplace and you pick up another one, you can track where the rocks have gone in the community. All residents made their own rocks, all staff, and then they track where their rocks have gone. Other people bring their rocks. It's about living. This is what engagement is basically living. It's being connected with life. And so that is like the social prescription. You know, what we're prescribing is life. What we're prescribing is enabling connection to be seen as important, and in the case of dementia, more important than medications. Now, there's not a pill in the world that can create a good quality of life. All right. I know lots of people who have no physical illnesses who have a terrible quality of life. I know people who have lots of physical disabilities who have a great quality of life. That's on us. So, next slide. So it's about a paradigm shift. You know, memory and cognition are highly valued in our culture. So what do we think about people who have cognitive deficits? How do we think about them? You know, if you've ever seen commercials where people are laughed at because their phone doesn't download fast enough. Old people are cool, okay? And persons with dementia are cool. And learning their stories, connecting with them, that's everything. So we have to look at the world through a new lens and think in terms of purposeful roles rather than entertainment or distraction. Next. So here's like a tool that we have, and you can get it from the slides, on getting people to start thinking about what capabilities a person has rather than their disabilities. It changes the way we start thinking about people. Next slide. This is about independence once again, about using what we call cognitive ramps, where instead of a ramp for a wheelchair, it's a ramp to circumvent a cognitive deficit. And we need to have more of those in our environments, both in memory care and out in the world. And then next slide. These are 12 key principles, and this is what guides everything we do. So once again, I encourage people to, download the slides. I'll just give you a couple of examples. Demonstrate more and talk less, especially for advanced dementia. Show a person what you want them to do and have them imitate it, as opposed to coming at me with a razor blade. That's a prescription for an incident report, okay? But if you come with an electric razor and you show me how to use it, and then I come on, I use it, that's a different story. And so the last one, don't think right or wrong, think engagement. Okay, I always say, look at their face. Are they happy? Are they engaged? Whatever you're doing it right. That's the key. And then last slide, I think, for me. Well, go ahead, one more, we'll advance. Yeah, go ahead. And again, yeah, so anyway, here's our website. We've got lots of stuff, books on activities for dementia, different visits, how to have a better visit with a person with dementia. That's very good for family members. And how to teach empathy and conflict resolution to people with dementia. And finally, that very last one with the green, we're about to take out into the world an assessment system for dementia that focuses on finding strengths and capabilities and matching that with the person's background rather than giving us a number between 0 and 30. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Cameron. I think that your video is just so impactful to walk through that for someone who's learning how to apply your method, but not just your method, how to apply social prescription. And when you provide those real life examples, it very much helps too. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right. And David.
Well, thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Jennifer. You know, just to reflect on your comments, I'm so empowered and pleased, Cameron, to hear your words, and Jennifer. And you know, it is true that, you know, after decades of research and billions of dollars, we still don't truly have a medicine that can impact Alzheimer's disease. I think the treatment for Alzheimer's disease is you and me. It's about socialization, it's about engagement, it's about education of the care partner, of our professional staff. And I think creating what I like to call this therapeutic environment. And if you Google the phrase therapeutic environment, you'll probably hit dozens of definitions, but I like a very simple one, which is a therapeutic environment is an environment that is healing. And I think this is really so empowering. Cameron, you'll be tickled by this. I remember getting a call a couple of years ago, right before the pandemic, and someone called me and said, our dementia consultant said we should not have rose bushes in the garden, because after all, the people with dementia will fall into the rose bushes and impale themselves on the thorns. And you know, I think that story, of course, I said, you know, listen, should we take away forks and knives because something could happen with those? So I loved your video of the soup, because of course, this thinking that we have to, you know, somehow protect the person with dementia, we have to just sort of walk on eggshells. I think it's very old school. Of course, we want rose bushes in memory care. Roses symbolize old traditions and gardening and being outdoors, and they have a spiritual connection. And so I liked what you said, Cameron, about if anybody tells you you must do this or you must do this or this will never work, I think be suspicious. You know, I think the contemporary view of dementia that I know Jennifer and Cameron support so much is that people with dementia are really just like the rest of us, all the same needs, emotions, feelings. And this is, I think, very, very important. And I think you'll be hearing from today's workshop and the conference, you know, we are kind of fellow travelers. We all have that light bulb moment of understanding how you live with people with dementia and how you motivate them and how you help them and support them and how you be, in my work, a best friend. But not everybody feels this way. We have to make this battle. We have to push and say, hey, our work is important. The activity programming, socialization, this is a key to happiness. And it's not the medical model versus a social model. It's both working together. So with those few reflections, let's jump in so I can keep on time, Jennifer, if you don't mind advancing my slides. I think many of you may know a bit about the Best Friends approach, but this was born in the 1980s with my dear friend and colleague, Virginia Bell, when we both worked at the University of Kentucky, then just one of 10 federally funded Alzheimer's disease research centers in the country. I well remember back then, you know, before the internet, Virginia and I would prepare packets of information for people, mail things out. It was not uncommon, by the way, for people to say, please send these envelopes in an unmarked envelope. We don't want the word Alzheimer's on the return address. The stigma was really debilitating, but fortunately, we've come a long way. And from this early work Virginia and I did at the Day Center in Kentucky, one of the first day centers in the country, we recognized this power of engagement and socialization. This is sort of where we had our aha moment that really what a person with dementia needs is a friend, is a best friend. And we'll talk more about that as the presentation goes forward. I have to do one shout out. My dear friend and longtime writing partner, Virginia Bell, is turning 100 years old on June 30th. And if you're on my social media or Facebook page, you'll see a lot of cool things. Virginia and I are working on a new book together. She's very active, and it's just an honor to, I'll be with her in Lexington, Kentucky for her 100th. Next slide. So again, this model of dementia care, we began writing in the 1980s and 90s. Our first book came out in 1996, The Best Friends Approach to Alzheimer's Care. And much to our surprise, I think the field was ready for a more optimistic, positive view about how you live with a person with dementia. Perhaps if we'd written the book 10 years earlier, it might have been a complete failure because people were so stuck on all the negative losses and challenges of dementia. But we believed that actually there's a lot you can do to lift this person up and be their best. And fortunately, I think because in part this model of care about friendship, after all, what do friends do? They do things together, I think was very much embraced by the activity professional world. And we're just delighted that our work has sort of traveled the world in many ways, not just in even the US or Canada. Next slide. So what is a best friends approach? Again, we only have about 8 or 9 minutes here, but I'll just say basically that, again, without a medical model treatment, it's about helping this person feel safe, secure, valued, productive. And when we have a good friend, after all, if I have a good friend who has a migraine, for example, I'm going to understand that if he's a bit snippy with me over a coffee, that I'll be forgiving because he has a migraine. Well, similar with Alzheimer's disease, of course, it's the disease, not the person. We want to have empathy and understanding. Friends, if you have a true friend, you're empathetic, you're affectionate, you're warm. You know a lot about them, and this is something I'll focus on in my next few minutes, but this life story work, Virginia and I were very early writers about the importance of social history, and I think we can do a much better job in our field of knowing that if someone was a poet, we want to potentially read poetry to them or talk about Emily Dickinson or have them write a group poem together. Friends communicate. Today we text, we email, all of this. But again, we know sadly the language centers of the brain are damaged by most of these dementias. There's a lot we can learn in my books, on my website, lots of handouts. There's so much good stuff from the Alzheimer's Association about learning how to be an effective communicator with a person with dementia, creative problem solving, doing things together. And in my books, I use this very old-fashioned word called knack, K-N-A-C-K. And knack is the art of doing difficult things with ease or clever strategies. I know all, 661 participants. I know you all have lots of a great knack as you travel your journey with people with dementia. Next slide. So again, not having a lot of time today, I thought I'd just give a couple of mini case studies from the work I've done with Virginia Bell. This one with Patricia stems from the Adult Day Center in Kentucky. Patricia, and we have permission to, of course, talk about all these clients of the Day Center in this case. Patricia had a lot of language damage to her brain, her communication skills. She was a folk artist. She was very involved in her local faith community in Lexington, Kentucky. She did beautiful, beautiful art, by the way. But she had a behavior where she would make noises. She would go, ah, ah, ah. Now, as you can imagine, the other participants at the Day Center were none too pleased. The staff, of course, and the volunteers, we rolled with it. But some of the other participants would say, what's wrong with her? Or shut up or be quiet. So you can imagine that a lesser program might have said, oh, to the family, oh, we love Patricia, she's lovely, but she's disruptive, the noise is too much, you can't bring her back anymore. Well, that's not how Virginia Bell rolls in Kentucky with her Adult Day Center. So we studied her life. And we realized that she had this great tradition of painting and watercolor. She had these beautiful, incredible portraits of African-American women in these incredible clothes. And so we set up a little table for her with her brushes, her paints. We would, of course, take her hand and put the brush in her hand and dip it in the paint and get her started. And we discovered that when she was painting, and also, by the way, when we had little headphones or music nearby with her faith, her Christian music in this case, no audible sounds, no sounds, by again, being creative and understanding what might help her do better. Next slide. I think that our dementia care programming in this country, we have certainly some incredible providers, but I think we still struggle with even some of the most basic things. I know when I think about when a person first moves into memory care, is the life story with the staff? Do they have it, or is it still stuck in the marketing department or the intake department? You really can't admit a person to memory care, from my point of view, without knowing something about them. And to me, it's as important as their TB test or the financial responsibility form or whatever else you require. So be sure that life story information gets to your team. I'm even now doing like top 10 cards, things like this, because in this case, we had a gentleman who moved into memory care in the Pacific Northwest. He was a retired hotel manager from a 5-star hotel. here's the Empress Hotel in Victoria, even though that wasn't quite where he was. Now, again, what does a hotel manager do? They make the rounds, they have their clipboards, they straighten the collars of their staff, they greet guests, they approve menus, they do remodeling, so many things, so many things. Now, again, this hotel manager, he happened to be a younger onset person. How did they help him? Well, they would call him hotel manager or manager George. They would give him a clipboard, they'd make the rounds, they'd bring in wallpaper books, they have him approve menus, they talk with him. They genuinely valued a lot of his advice, by the way. It wasn't all just silly programming, but still this idea of giving him importance. You know, I'm always about sometimes, you know, theory and research and practice, but sometimes it just comes to very basic things. And I have to tell you, one of my favorite tools, if you don't have them in your program, is a clipboard. Because I think when people have a clipboard, they feel that sense of importance. And I've given it to nurses and to hotel managers. But again, how can I be a best friend to Patricia? How can I be a best friend to George, the hotel manager? By treating them as a person, by thinking about their strengths, not all their challenges. You know, again, be bold. Think about good programming. Very, very important. Next slide, please. So when we think about activities, and I'm going to lay this argument out again in my final 3 or 4 minutes here, you know, I want to encourage you to think about activities, but also to think about what I like to call activities with engagement, okay? Really trying to make the most of your programming. And this is just a few things that we all do here: music, exercise, time outdoors, chores, you know, doing things for others, as Cameron mentioned, you know, streaming programs on nature or history you can do through Link Senior, learning together, writing a mini memoir, as our previous speaker talked about, having a spring or summer project. All of these things I think are really powerful. Spirituality as well. But when you think about the program, I almost want you to imagine, like, let's say, you know, network news, CBS morning show or the Today Show is coming in to spend a day with you. You know, would you just do ordinary things, or would you really up your game? And I want you to up your game. You know, with music, for example, why not, instead of having it on the calendar be, you know, music hour, have an evening concert, print up tickets to the concert. You know, Muriel, I have your ticket for you. I have a chair saved for you. All of these things. Try to add more to your activity program. You know, there was an early book in the field called Failure-Free Activities for People with Dementia. And actually it was quite a nice book, but I never liked the title. Failure-free activities. Do any of us lead a failure-free life? Of course not. You know, if we don't occasionally flop as an activity director, I think you're maybe playing it too safe, right? And of course, sometimes your flops end up being the most fun. Maybe you're doing a paper mache solar system of planets to support an upcoming you know, solar event or an eclipse. And of course, have fun with it. If they're playing beach volleyball with Jupiter, so what? Next slide. Again, the important sort of theoretical framework that Link Senior has been so supportive of, I think dementia care, as Jennifer said, is just the perfect example of the power of social prescription, because there's not a drug prescription, is there? Right? The social prescription looks at the person in a holistic way with a focus on creating well-being. The social prescription connects persons with dementia to community support, including social events, opportunities for classes and learning, exercise, and the arts and social services. So again, we want to be very, very attentive to that. The Best Friends approach recognizes each person's individuality and the importance of being in community. Next slide. Again, some recommendations. One of the things Virginia and I have talked about in our books, we call it 30 things to do in 30 seconds or less. I think it's available free on my website with all my handouts, bestfriendsapproach.com. Again, think about all the time that you're not spending on the calendar. Train staff to give the little hand rub, to talk and tell a funny story. And this unstructured time is very, very important. One little study from 2002 talked about how 65% of residents' times in a skilled nursing center is do nothing time. Try to avoid these do nothing times. Tie activities into the person's life story and interest. I don't think we do enough of that to know someone's history and try to do activities they might enjoy. Again, enjoy activities with engagement. Let me give you a quick, simple example of what I'm talking about making the most of this. A standard activity might be taking a walk. Okay, you go outside, you got the residents or the clients, if you're at a day program, and take a walk. Great, you're outside, sunshine, vitamin D, you get good exercise, it supports your goals, it's enjoyable. But if you do that same walk with what I call kind of the best friends philosophy with engagement, along the path, enjoy conversation. Stop and talk about gardens and flowers. Maybe you'll discover a resident had been a master gardener. Reminisce, hold hands, discuss the miracle of Mother Nature. What does that even mean? And again, trying to make the most out of these ordinary activities. Again, with your calendar, even come up with some clever names. Again, change out music to evening concert, and maybe instead of just saying walk, say, a walk to explore the nature, or Mother Nature walk, or something like that, to give that little extra pizzazz to your programming. Next slide. Again, some resources here. My website is bestfriendsapproach.com. I'm also, I'd like to invite you to join my community for Facebook. You just put in facebook.com and go Best Friends Approach, or type Best Friends Approach in your browser. You can see in the middle, I do have a couple of books on activities, Volume 1 and Volume 2, which have lots of ideas. And our most recent book is called The Best Friends Approach to Dementia Care, that's very much a book for how you develop good programming. Final slide, forgive a little bit of promotion here. My publisher in honor of Link Senior, Health Professions Press in Baltimore. If you go to healthpropress.com and put in this code BFWL22, how they came up with that, I have no idea, I guess best friend something. They do have a discount for everybody on the webinar. Thank you all very much. I'll look forward to being with you a little bit the rest of the day. And I'm again honored to be part of Charles's work, and thank you for everything you're doing. My own mom lived in memory care for 3 years, passed away in 2008. My mother-in-law lives in assisted living now. So you are very important people. Keep up your wonderful work. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. I really just believe when you talk about your best friend, right? Your best friend knows the essence of who you are. And that is really just the helm of social prescription. So very great work in what you do. So thank you so much. And then very briefly, I'm just going to touch upon the my new model, the Dementia Connection model, and how that supports social prescription as well. We have very little time, so I'm not going to be able to go into a lot of what it is, but the Dementia Connection model is a framework. Essentially, it's a cognitive behavioral approach. When we look at how the brain processes work and how disease progresses, it's really understanding those two things. And so the approach to care within the Dementia Connection model is sensory stimulation. And why does that work? We all know it works, right? But why does it work is really for a couple of reasons. One, we do know through the theory of retrogenesis that as the disease progresses, that people with dementia are kind of going back in time, if you will, right? Everything is going to reverse towards infancy. And they're going to navigate their world really very similarly to how adolescents navigate their world. And what that is they use their senses to learn and to understand their environment and to connect to people. And so that's really why sensory stimulation works well. And the other piece to this of why it works so well is when we receive stimuli, it's actually processed in our limbic system. And in our limbic system, we have two very important organs. Our amygdala, which helps in the generate of our feelings and emotions, and our hippocampus, which is responsible for our memories. And so when we are being stimulated in a very positive way, our limbic system is firing there, and it's actually helping to influence positive emotions and positive memories, which in essence does influence the person with dementia to have positive types of behavioral expressions and connections to the people that are around them. And that's why it's a cognitive behavioral approach to care. The key here, though, is consistency, using this every single day. And that's what we do with habilitation, is we reinforce the skills that the person still has, and we do this every single day. So their approach is going to be on a routine basis. And so I like to use the API process, because at Link Senior, we express a lot about the API process because it is a standard of care in healthcare. And so I'm going to insert the Dementia Connection model in this API process, where when we're assessing our residents, we are looking at sensory needs and their preferences, all looking at those domains of wellness. We're also then during the plan, taking that information and creating a prescription, right? Based on which sensory tools are we going to use to influence those positive emotions, right? And then from there, when we implement it, you're going to track that data to see, what do I want to track? What is my outcome? Am I looking to see if they're more engaged in the activities that I'm providing? Am I looking at how many minutes they're willing to be engaged in what I'm providing. Am I decreasing negative behavioral expressions that we, are seeing that maybe are impacting them or impacting the people around them, right? So you choose your outcomes and you track that, and then you evaluate, am I getting the outcomes that I'm looking for? If I'm not, I need to readjust my plan. Maybe I need to change those sensory tools. Maybe they're not influencing their emotions in the way that I thought I would, which ultimately would influence their behaviors. And so when we use a dementia connection model, essentially what that is, it's allowing the caregiver or staff member to support the person living with dementia in a positive way. And in return, the person with dementia thrives in their new world without judgment, expectations, and controls. And when the two of them are harmonious in this model, they have a better connection. The person with dementia associates those positive feelings with the caregiver, and the caregiver feels confident in what they're doing. And I call that a win-win in my book, which is really exciting experience. And I want to share just a brief group study that I had done in implementing the dementia connection model in assisted living environment here in the Midwest, as I'm in Chicago. And what we did was we implemented very sensory-based tools based on preferences. We implemented aromatherapy for olfactory stimulation, music for auditory stimulation, and color plate work for visual stimulation. And we found really great results. 46% of residents increased their food consumption, 54% gained or maintained weight, which was great, and 72% decreased their supplemental use. So they were eating real food, which is fantastic. And we did 90% satisfaction rate, which is wonderful, 90+ satisfaction rate. And so here's a resource for you. You can find out more about the dementia connection model. I know I went through that really fast, but you can find out more about it at dementiaconnectioninstitute.org. And then there's my book there, which can be found at our website, Johns Hopkins Press, Amazon, and Barnes & Noble. But what I want to do is continue to extend this conversation above and beyond our methodologies, because you can see that research has shown that social prescription can work. Methodologies have shown that social prescription can work. Technology can also help the social prescription model. Now, Link Senior back in 2020 had the RICE study, and they had over 700 submissions. And what they were looking at was how do activity professionals provide and gather preference-based data and work that into the way that they develop programs and provide and implement programs. And what they found is when resident preference data is stored electronically, staff are 2 times more likely to create individualized plans, which is the helm of social prescription. And 133% more likely to build community, meaning be able to match residents into groups of people with the same preferences and really encourage that socialization piece. Again, another helm of social prescription. And when staff use electronic engagement platforms, they're 162% more likely to know if residents are engaged in programming in real time, so they can make sure residents are being engaged. And 183% more likely to know if programs match their preferences, which again is who they are. And so really when we use technology can really be helpful, and the Link Senior program does that. And so when we talk a little bit about more research, right? So a follow-up to the RICE study that I actually conducted with Link Senior in the fall of 2021 was called the EPI study, or the Elder Engagement Performance Improvement Study. And there we were kind of taking a step up to say, okay, now that we are in the know that we have to provide engagement via preferences, right? How do we work that into the API model that I shared with you earlier? And so we found that through this process that 77% of activity professionals seek out evidence-based research to some capacity. So we know that when we talk about social prescription, that it's a need and it's a want from the people who are running our activities, planning our activities, implementing our activities every single day. And so the question here then is, how do we use the API model to uphold social prescription? So I want to break this down with you here real quickly. So with assess, that's where we look at all domains of wellness, right? Physical part, mental part, spiritual part, psychosocial, and so on, right? And then when we are completing the plan part, this is where our prescribing comes in, right? So do we plan for that person that they take 30-minute walks 5 days a week? Do we talk about that they listen to music of the 40s, preferably maybe this person likes Frank Sinatra or Doris Day? We do that daily between 2:30 to 4, maybe right before sundown, to help calm the individual, right, and influence those positive emotions, right? So with that said, we want to write out that plan. You can also have a plan for your group as a community, right? And so what would that plan look like? Are you trying to encourage more of a certain preference based on the totality of your group, or are you trying to break it down into smaller groups for residents who have very specific interests? So this can, when you plan the component of prescription, you can do it on an individual basis. You can also do it on a group basis, right? Then you're going to implement, of course, your plan. So you want to make sure that you have a routine that the staff are following when they're implementing the prescriptions, you know, whether that's schedules or whether that's different kinds of markers throughout the day that indicate that these plans need to be carried out, right? And then you can also, yes.
I did just one thing. We're over time, if you don't mind.
Oh, okay.
No, it's okay. Yeah, just if you don't mind wrapping up.
Wrap up. Yes, real fast. Sorry about that. So just want to leave you with this. Where do we start with social prescription? You may have heard Charles talk about that here at Link Senior, we are trying to encourage the 85-35 rule. We want to encourage that you engage 85% of your residents on a monthly basis, and that you engage each resident at 35 minutes a day. Now, you can see on the bottom here, that's where we came up with benchmarks, but really this is where you start, right? And so when we talk about how do I even start to implement this if I haven't already, think about engaging 85% of your residents on a monthly basis and each resident at 35 minutes a day. And we see that it's already happening within our customer data. We can provide this to you real time, right? And so we see with our customer data that about 33% of our customers are implementing both rules. So that's wonderful, and we need to continue to encourage that. So we don't have time, of course, unfortunately, for our case study here and questions. So I do apologize for that. I'm just going to go ahead and skip forward to all of this. We just had so much information for you. But all in all, we just want to say that social prescription is a need and a want. No matter the methodology that you decide to use, right? Social prescription is at the helm of most of these methodologies. If you follow through using the API process, it keeps you organized in implementing that methodology that you choose to uphold social prescription. And when you use technology to do that, it makes it much easier. So let's get started with the 85-35 rule. Thank you, Charles. Sorry, I ran over time. As everybody knows, I love to talk, so.
That's okay. Thank you so much, Jen. I want to take a second to also thank you, Cameron and David, for your amazing contribution. As I said, the social prescription is the future. Meaning is medicine. Dementia care is where it all starts, and actually starts with the three of you. So thanks again. Have a wonderful afternoon. We'll be in touch. And for everyone that's interested in the slides and the recording, we'll be sending that your way as well.